Basically, she was asking about security of passwords. You know, and we've all seen where you have to come in and have a 27-character password with 5 special characters and 6 numbers, and it can't have an actual word. You know, there's all kinds of variations of that. The bottom line is, it is the customer's responsibility to set a password that is yours and yours alone. And I know, none of us are naive, right? We know that we have so many different passwords, it's almost impossible to try to remember them all in your head. So we all invariably end up writing them down or documenting it somewhere. Okay, I'm not naive, I know that's happening. I do it myself. But it's incumbent on every single one of us as individuals. If you have a list of your passwords, you have to protect it. So put it in a lockbox, do whatever you need to do to protect it and keep it safe. And don't take shortcuts when you're creating your password. Don't use the same password for every single account you have. Right? My password is password 12345. Right? Use different passwords. Follow the protocol for the website that you're using. And again, most of them are getting stronger and stronger. So you have to have numbers, letters, uppercase, lowercase, special characters, etc. Don't use words. Don't put, your dog's name 12345 and then exclamation point. One tip that I think the experts will tell you is to use a phrase. Just a random phrase, like, I really hate golf because I'm no good at it. That's really long, but that's a phrase that if you capitalize every single word, can meet the requirements of a lot of those websites. So think of a phrase and do it that way.
Is there any protection that the SEC offers, like at a bank there's an FDIC or whatever, but if some hacker was able to get into your investment account, is there any protection at all?
Not that I'm aware of. You know what, I'll check with my attorney colleagues in the back are shaking their head no. And that was my basic understanding, is it's incumbent on the customer to set a password, and if you lose your password or if you disclose it to someone else and they use that surreptitiously, the bank or the firm is indemnified from that, because they got it from you. Basically, if you lose your password. I can tell you this, the password thing, it's strictly math. How many math teachers we got in here? It's strictly math, right? If you take a 12-character password and you have 4 or 5 different things that have to be different, uppercase, lowercase, numbers, special characters, etc., then the number of possibilities, it just becomes math. And it would take, 27 Cray supercomputers all daisy-chained together to be able to crack your password. So there's safety in that. But will AI ever get to the point where it can just use magic to figure out what your password is? Who knows? That's a great question, though. Thank you. Yes, in the back.
Do you mind repeating her question for the audience?
Yeah, the question again was about security of passwords. And if you have a password and someone gets access to your account, does the SEC have a rule where the customer is not liable for that? And that is not the case. It's incumbent upon the customer, the investor, to protect your password and the security of your password for accounts where that's needed.
How frequent, or is there a frequency of changing your passwords that you should consider?
A lot of websites. I tell you, my colleagues in the back will echo this. With the government, we're required to change our password every 6 months, minimum. And I know there are websites that I use in my personal life that also periodically, like I'm a retired Navy guy, right? My Navy retired pay account, same thing. Every 6 months, have to change that password. So it's a good idea, again, to periodically, on your own, just update your password. And again, don't just change the number from 1 to 2, change the whole password. Keep it complex. It's a lot easier for a bad guy to figure it out if you're just changing one thing every 6 months. They can figure that out easier than if you put a whole new password in. But yes, to answer your question, so periodically, yes, it's a great idea to update your passwords. Yes?
I've been getting these mailers for CDs, 5.5%. How do I check out a bank? I mean, we've had some bank failures. How do I check out banks that I'm not usually banking with? Is that something the SEC covers?
So, banks are not regulated by the SEC, and that's the one thing. Unless you have an account, if your money's in a bank, and unless you have more than $250,000 deposited into your account, that's insured by the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. So that money is guaranteed safe. Unlike investment money, where if you put $100,000 in pick a brokerage firm, Fidelity, TD Ameritrade, Vanguard, whatever. If you give them $100,000 and you put it into a mutual fund, and that goes in the tank, no guarantees there. But FDIC insured. Same thing for credit unions. Any other questions? Yes.
So I was just checking that myself on our credit union account, and it did say that it is insured by the NCUA, but federally, and then there was a little sub-comment after that, but federally insured by FDIC. What does that mean? I mean, it's NCUA, but also federally insured?
They may be tied together somehow. I'm not familiar with that rule, but I can assure you that credit union, if it's an accredited credit union, like I'm a member of Navy Federal for 40 years, guaranteed my deposits up to $250,000.
And the only reason I was checking that out was because of these latest bank failures, so I was checking our credit union accounts. Kind of as a follow-up to her question, what would the SEC recommend as far as receiving any type of financial information through the U.S. mail? Would you recommend, so we started getting our statements, instead of having them sent through the U.S. mail, we just pull them up online because of some hackers, pulling your mail out of your mailboxes. But then also, as far as any financial credit card statements and that type of thing, would the SEC recommend just not receiving any of that through the U.S. mail? Or is that more of a personal preference?
I was going to say, we don't have an official policy or recommendation or anything that specifically says how you should manage United States Postal Service delivery. But you make a very valid point. Again, these fraudsters out there, I tell people all the time, if these bad guys devoted just half of the effort they put into being evil to doing something good, how great a world would we live in, right? But those bad actors, they have no conscience at all. So yeah, they'll go right down the street and they'll pull the mail out of every mailbox if they can get away with it. And if they get your account statements from Fidelity or Vanguard or wherever, and they somehow manage to figure out your password and access your account, it's a liability. So you make a great point. Downloading your statements from the website is not a bad option, as opposed to receiving them in the mail. But it's not for everybody. And I think it is generational as well. It's absolutely generational. Young people today, they grew up with a laptop and a smartphone, and they're comfortable with every bit of that. Those of us, I'm 62, so I've been using computers for a long time, but I didn't start out. I wasn't born with one in my hand, so there's some things that I'm still a little sketchy with. But my parents, on the other hand, computer adverse. They didn't want anything to do with computers. So it is generational. My advice to people is, and this is just my personal opinion, is, you have to take care of your friends and family, more specifically your family. Look out for your parents and your grandparents and keep an eye on them. Again, I get calls from the public every month about some kind of sad story of some grandmother or grandfather, their mother, Aunt Sally, losing money because they just missed one really important thing that they could have done to prevent it. And if they'd had a mentor, if you will, or a guardian kind of looking over their shoulder, maybe that wouldn't have happened.
Thank you.
You said that they got into a very bad situation because they missed one thing.
Oh, yeah, that's all it.
They miss because they don't have mentor or help.
Well, any of those things, any of those red flags that I mentioned, keeping your password safe, not doing, all of the above. Yeah, it really only takes one mistake, just one mistake, and you could find your account balances as zero.
I got it. Thank you.
That's kind of the sky is falling perspective, but I'm telling you folks, it happens. I talked to a guy last week that lost $165,000. And that's just one of, a lot of sad stories that I can tell you. So it happens. Due diligence. Anybody else?
Advice on annuities and long-term care. I feel like I ran into scams along that line. I had an annuity salesperson try to get the bulk of my investment. I'm just retired just last year, and I have some investments. Get the bulk of my investment to go dump it into an annuity. And then speaking with somebody else, I learned, well, you lose access to your money. And it becomes something where they invest, they make the money, and they trickle it to you a little bit, that kind of thing. And then the long-term care, I feel like I'm not so sure about investing into long-term care now, because that could be something.
Well, I'm going to correct you because no one invests in long-term care. Your long-term care is an insurance product. You're buying insurance that is going to take care of you in your old age. As far as annuities, well, and again, we can't give advice, so I can't comment about whether annuity is something you should consider or not consider, but I can tell you this. When my two colleagues in the back there, Ms. Kristen and Mr. Graham, give their presentation here shortly, they're going to talk about a case that involved annuities. And annuities have a place. There are customers that annuities are appropriate for. So don't just discount annuities and say they're all bad. That's not the case. But it's also, just like any other kind of investment, there are opportunities for fraud and for high pressure, unscrupulous sales tactics. Yeah, and your wife, or the nodding knowingly. So that's the key takeaway is, I don't care what they're selling, annuities, mutual funds, long-term care insurance, anybody that's using high-pressure sale tactics, or if you don't buy it today, it's gone tomorrow, those are giant red flags. Just move on, find something else.
Would you please elaborate on the lost $165,000 man? Because I feel like information like that is helpful. And I was also wondering if you would reconsider the video that you didn't show us of the phone call and what to do and what not to do, because I feel like that's really helpful for people to have the verbiage
Sure.
for how to react in that situation if they're answering the phone.
Sure.
They don't know.
So the gentleman I spoke to that lost $165,000, I'm going to apologize because they do all start to kind of run together, and I don't have my notes in front of me. But I think with his case, and it's unfortunate that a lot of the way these calls that I take, they start with, well, I made an investment And then at the end of the story, I realized it was not even an investment. It was just fraud. And that kind of goes to what I was talking about, how there's about 8 or 9 different types, categories of scams. And then there's dozens of variations of every one of them. And the gentleman that I spoke to was victimized by, it was basically a scam where unsolicited, he got called and they said pitched an investment, and he didn't do any due diligence. He basically wrote a check, or actually no, I think in his case he wired the money. He wired the money, within a few days. And, as you might imagine, he's never going to see that money again. So wire fraud, we could talk for 45 minutes about wire fraud. So if anybody brings up wiring the money, that is a hard stop. In the Navy, we call that, ring the all-stop bell, stop the ship right now. We're not going anywhere where there's a wire involved until I know everything about it.